Now let's turn our attention to using constructors with our classes and objects. Now a constructor, as it turns out, is really very simply a method that is executed automatically when an object of a class is instantiated. Now you can kind of think about it, if you've ever worked with other languages, you have this main subroutine that will run first time every time. It's almost like that with a little kick. The constructor method is going to have the same name as the class. And so if we create a class, and then whatever the name of our class is, say the name of the class is animal, then we're going to create a method named animal as well. And what's going to happen is when that class is used to instantiate a new object, as soon as that object is loaded into memory and is created and comes into being, that constructor method is going to execute. Now this is really powerful because now we can initialize various aspects of our new objects as they come into being, and we don't have to do a separate call for that. Now think about an example. I don't know if you've seen the videos yet about inheritance where we talked about the veterinary clinic, and we're going to write this little code for it, and we'll talk about inheritance with the various objects. But in that one, we already know when someone brings an animal in, we're going to create an object and start to manipulate data based on that animal and that owner. Well, we can create that object and at the same time pass in the animal's name, an animal identifier ID, or the owner's name or ID, and go ahead and make a call out to a database and pull in the data that we already have to see what the latest status is. So a constructor allows us to initialize or take certain actions immediately as that object comes into being. Now a constructor, by the way, has been being created by default in the background. Even if you've never heard the word, you've still been using a constructor. So if you don't create one, kind of in the background, the little guys back there and ladies in the .NET framework are taking care of this for you. However, this is where the power comes in. You can provide a custom constructor, and not only that, you can overload that constructor so that you can create objects in a number of different manners. So the best way to understand this, like most coding, is to see a demo. So what we're going to do is jump out into the environment here, the operating system. We're going to open Visual Studio 2012, and I'm going to create a project, and I'm going to entitle that project Constructor Example, or Using Constructors. Let's call it Using Constructors. All right, so we're going to use some constructors here. So I'm going to open my basic Windows Forms application because we want to make this as simply about C# as we can, and this keeps us in the environment. I like these better than the right line, console right line type things. I hope you do. I hope you're finding this useful as well. And so I'm going to go into the toolbox and I'm going to drop a button onto my form, and then we will kick our functionality off by clicking our button, and this jumps us back into the code, and we're going to run the button click event. You've probably noticed that. Give myself some room here. Now what we want to do is we're going to create a class, and then we're going to create objects off of that and use constructors. So this is where our main code is going to run, but we need to go over to the Solution Explorer and right click on our project name using constructors, and we want to add a class in here. Okay, so we'll add a class file to our project, and we will just leave this as class 1, and we will click add, and you will see there is our class 1 out there. Now let me point out something here, and I don't know if I've pointed this out in the course so far. I could come right down here and stay within that namespace and create a class right here. Okay, I could do that very easily, and you can see this stuff. However, it's generally better, and it's going to be easier for you most of the time, to create the classes in separate files. They work the same way, but it just kind of keeps things separated out and kind of granular so you can work with them. So here we go. Let's go to our class file. Notice right up here on the tab, if you don't see the tab, you can always go to Solution Explorer. Just double click on the class 1 CS file, and here you are. Okay. Now what I want to do, first of all, I want to put just a regular method in here. I'm going to come down a little bit, and I'm just going to call this public void marks method. Okay. And we won't pass anything into that, and then we'll just put a little comment code here. I don't know what marks method does. Probably not a lot. So if I go back to my code now, and I use class 1, the type of class 1. I'm creating a variable, and we will call this variable m. All right, and we'll set that equal to, it's a variable m with the type of class 1. We'll set it to a new instance of class 1. Now when we call m and press period, IntelliSense shows us all the standards. These are coming from object and so forth. And then there's Mark's method. And so we can call Mark's method, right? Pretty straightforward. Now, Mark's method's not really going to do anything because we don't have any functionality in there. But normally that's what we would end up. We would create the class, and then we would start, setting properties, or starting, go connect out to a database and start to load aspects of our object and so forth. Well, let's talk about how we can use constructors to go a whole new route. So join me in part 2, and we will take a look at creating some constructors on our class.